Welcome back, and today we have another week of grosses, and as I predicted, Water for Elephants is closing. We have a lot to get into, so let's get into it. And Juliet went from 72.8 to 77.52 and 644K to 674K. And big news, Charli D'Amelio is going to be in And Juliet in an ensemble track, which goes to show how desperate And Juliet is for box office revenue. Will this help? I don't think in the long term, no. I think Charli D'Amelio's audience do not have the money to go and see Broadway shows, and neither do they have the interest, and the people that are going to come are going to be disappointed when little old Charli is in the background going like... When shows stunt cast, it means that they are struggling, that they are on the brink of closing in some cases, or they are just... the steam has come out of And Juliet. And if this doesn't close this year, I think it will probably close next year. I think it's not looking great. It's not looking great. I think if it was doing these numbers all year, then I'd be like, this is 100% going to close in 2024. But I do not think And Juliet is going to close at the end of this year, because if you look at the grosses, it has done very decent to somewhat okay to like making $1 million a couple of weeks. So that will hold them over a little bit. But obviously it didn't do so amazing that I'm like, it can 100% take this, no problem. As Moulin Rouge is doing the same kind of stunt casting as is Hadestown, as those shows have clearly gone out of steam and the producers don't want to close it, so they were like, how do we get people to come in? Stunt casting. It's basic business 101. Aladdin continues to fall, going from 86% to 89% and 978K to 979K. Not great numbers, but again, Aladdin can take it because it's done fantastic this year. It's been running for, I think, 10 years. So even if it does close in the next 2 years, it's gonna have been on. It's been here for over a decade, so it's fine. Back to the Future is going to close. Like, it's gonna be next. It's doing horrendous. This week, 61%, or last week, 61%, this week, 64%, and 552K to 604K. I don't think I need to dive into this. You guys know that this is one of the most expensive shows currently on Broadway. Cabaret, the Kit Kat Club, performed to 90% last week and 91% this week, and 1,033,318 last week, and 989K last week. Obviously, it's not doing as good without Eddie or Gail. I think this will close when their contracts expire. Adam's contract expires, and I think that's in March. Because I just don't think... I mean, this show is so expensive to put on, and I think that these are two very hard parts, and stunt casting, you know, works best if it's not a super hard part. I mean, maybe they could get Groban. I don't know if that would work. Maybe Jackman. I don't know. But, I mean, this definitely... has to be making $1 million a week, you know, not 1,033,000, but like 1,100,000, 1,200,000. So it's done well enough that it can take this hit. And again, I don't think it's going to close before the contracts expire, but like all musical revivals that rely on stunt casting, with the exception of Sweeney to an extent, close very quickly after the big star leaves. Sweeney did manage to go on until the end of May, and it was supposed to be a limited engagement. And obviously Sutton and Aaron didn't do as good as Josh and Annalie Ashford, but they still brought in a very good, significant amount of money. Hadestown went from 93% to 94%, and 613K to 623K. Not a good week for Hadestown at all. Again, it's a show that has been that's been going out of steam since last year, and they've kind of been surviving because of stunt casting. I do think this will still be here a year from now, because they had a pretty good 2024. They had a couple weeks in the $1 Million Club, especially in the beginning when they saw huge surges because they had a bunch of stunt casting and all that stuff. So again, I don't think Hadestown is in any trouble. I don't think it's going to close by the end of this year. I think it is not the most expensive production to put on, but any show that's doing, any show, regardless of size, that has a 6 in front of it is not doing good and is in trouble. Hamilton, 90% last week, 90% this week, 1,525,816 last week. This week, 1,570,538. Harry Potter, 80% to 80%, 902K to 902K, so it didn't change at all. Harry Potter is doing pretty bad. I think that, if they can stick it out until the Harry Potter TV show comes on, I think that they might get some more interest. But ultimately, I think Harry Potter has always been an underperformer. I mean, listen, when it first opened, it was gangbuster numbers. But for it being Harry Potter, it wasn't making $2 million a week. And I feel like that was kind of what the expectation was and what it should be doing. So I always feel like it's underperformed. And while I don't think it's going to close at the end of this year, I could definitely see it closing within the next 2 years. Or maybe even next year, because if it continues these numbers, they're just not sustainable. Because if you've seen Harry Potter, you know how expensive that production is. Hell's Kitchen had 6 performances, but 94 last week, 98% this week. 1,291,284 last week, and 1,154,611 last week. Moulin Rouge went from 95% to 96%, and 1,047,214 to 1,083,713. And Aaron and JoJo are leaving soon. And again, we've been over this. It's a show that's kind of relying on stunt casting, and when it wasn't having stunt casting, it was just doing pretty bad. Will this close this year or even next year? I think it'll just make it through, but I definitely do think we're in the twilight years of this production. And again, if it falls to like 8s or 7s, then like yes, 100% could close this year or next year. But I think we're seeing the slow, gradual decline of this show. Once Upon a Mattress, I don't cover the show a lot, but I thought I'd give my thoughts. So this week it did 85%. Last week 88%, 727 this week, 746K last week. These are solid, decent numbers for a revival, but I feel like because it's Sutton Foster and because she is a bit of a star, these are kind of lackluster numbers in my opinion. I feel like if you're a star, it's 8s, it's 9s, it's $1 million. And that's pretty much all I had to say on it. I don't know if any of you agree, but that's just my opinion. 6 went from 77% to 79%, and 627K to 618K. Definitely 6 is having its worst performance financially in its entire lifetime. Again, I think these are still good enough numbers that it will be sustained, and it's going to be here for a lot longer. But I think it could survive on 6s and 5s and even 4s for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, because it is such an inexpensive production to put on. And again, they've made so much money. I think they've recouped their investment, but obviously a show can't do this bad for this long. But I do think that it will. I think it's in a stable enough position from the money it made this year that it will be able to take these hits. And I think that we will see improvements. Obviously, if it falls to like 5s and 4s and 3s, then we might have a conversation. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if it closed in 25 or 26, but I don't think it's in immediate danger. But it's definitely a huge, red alert. Stereophonic, 98% last week and 99% this week. 837K last week, 849K this week. Suffs, 82% last week and 85% this week. 710K last week and 747K this week. Decent numbers. Obviously, it is doing all right, but technically, I think they have enough justification that if they wanted to say, hey, Suffs, get out of here, we got a better show coming in, they could 100% do that. Because, again, once you get past the 800K number, it's not great. Obviously, it's done better than we all thought. It did decent over the summer. I think it made $1 million once. So it definitely is in a better place than Shucked, which is what I'm kind of comparing Suffs to. But again, I think even with these numbers, they're not big enough that I think people are like, we need this show to stay on. But again, it 100% could still stay, but it's in a very moderate, mediocre place. Sunset Boulevard, 1 performance, 100% capacity, and 304K at the box office. Average ticket of 187, top ticket of 499. So we'll see how this does. I'm interested to see if it does well, because I know it is a very modern adaptation, but it's a solid start for Sunset Boulevard. Not a lot to take from it at the current moment, because it only had 1 performance. But 304K is not terrible. The Book of Mormon, 88% last week and 92% this week. 756K last week, 812K this week. Again, Book of Mormon has had very softened numbers over the past year. It's been here for 10 plus years, so even if it does close, it's had a very long, healthy run. I think that it will be here a year from now, and probably even 2 years from now. I think even though it is doing lower numbers, it's been around for so long, it's made so much money that I think they can take these hits, and they have highs, they have lows, so I wouldn't be too concerned about the Book of Mormon, but I don't know if it'll be here in 4 years, put it that way. Great Gatsby did 82% last week and 85% this week. 966K last week and 990K this week. A solid week for Gatsby. Obviously, it's a high running. Its costs are very expensive, and ideally, a show like this would be making $1 million every single week. But from April to like August, it made $1 million every single week. So it is able to take these hits, and they are hits. You know, it's obviously not great, but it's not going to close this year, and I don't think it's going to maybe even close next year. I mean, we'll see. I think when Jeremy and Eva leave, I think that will be a huge indicator of like how much of it was their star power, because I think there is a bit of star power to them that is attracting some audiences. But Gatsby's safe, guys. Like, it's fine. Obviously, some people might say, well, it's making under $1 million, so it's in trouble. And like, yeah, it's not great, but like, if a show's made $1 million for months on end and it's having a weak month that's a expected weak month, it's not gonna hurt anyone. It's gonna be fine. There's Thanksgiving, there's Christmas. Shows tend to do better this month anyways than in September, and it got past the September lull pretty well, I'd say. It made it out pretty okay. The Notebook went from 74% to 77%, and 514K to 530K, and again, that's closing, no shock to that. The Outsiders sold out, going from 1,320,126 to 1,337,388. Water for Elephants, which has just announced its closing, did 62% this week. Last week, 56%, 554K this week, and 623K this week. And again, it's not a big shock. It's a production that, on average, costs, I think the operating costs were like 900 something. It's $25 million production. So it's no shock that a show that's doing this bad with that kind of budget would close. I mean, I don't think I need to explain it. If you've been following the channel, you know that, okay, it makes sense. You know, it's a very expensive production to put on every single week, and it's when you hit 5s and 6s for a production of this size, it's lights out, unless you turn it around super quick. I mean, any show that does 5s and 6s is in trouble, or any show, regardless of size, doing 5s and 4s is not good. But yeah, Water for Elephants is closing, so I think that you know, Subs could potentially announce a closing. I'm kind of on the fence on that. We'll see what happens in the next month, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I think for sure, Back to the Future and is the next show to announce a closing. I don't think any other show is going to close this year, but I think Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and Juliet, Hades Town, probably, and 6, I think, are 4 shows to keep a big eye out for, and you know, if you want to see those shows, probably should go see them now, because, you know, 2 to 3 years from now, a good two of those shows are going to be gone. So I know this was a long video, but there was a lot to go over, a lot to cover. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.